Okay, why don't we get started? My name is Kenneth Oy, and I'm a professor in political science and engineering systems here at MIT. And it is my great pleasure today to introduce and moderate and converse with Ranil Wickramsinghe. This is what is called a star forum of the Center for International Studies. It's the headline series of the MIT Center. And Ranil Wickramsinghe is currently here visiting MIT as a Wilhelm Fellow. And the Wilhelm Fellow is a position for distinguished statespersons from all over the world. The last couple Wilhelm Fellows have included David Miliband, the former Foreign Secretary of the UK, currently with the International Rescue Committee, Yukio Okamoto, a senior Japanese statesman, Hans-Georg Eichler from the European Medicines Agency. And what our selections for this program have in common is a commitment to more than simply sitting in high office, okay? So to try to offer a bit of an introduction to Ranil, he is the current leader of the opposition of the parliament in Sri Lanka, and he has served as Prime Minister of Sri Lanka twice. Now, serving in high office is, of course, something that people aspire to, but I think the measure of a person is what they do when they are presented with the opportunity. And as Prime Minister, Ranil acted in a manner that was quite extraordinary. Instead of polarizing ethnic and religious tensions, as is so commonly the case in this world, Ranil reached across the lines from Sinhalese to Tamil, from Buddhist to Muslims and Hindus and Christians. Instead of viewing high office as an opportunity for personal enrichment or enrichment of family and friends, as is again too common, Ranil embarked upon an ambitious program of economic reform while also paying attention to social provision. And I would like to say that this is commonplace, but unfortunately it's not. And it's a testament to the character of our speaker today that when presented with opportunity, he worked with the Norwegians and others, with good people in Sri Lanka, to do good things. And this is something which I think we should praise him for. Ranil's topic today will be the Indian Ocean, vortex of destiny. And what we've decided might be kind of a nice format would be, instead of going up to the platform and giving a long speech, that we have a conversation working through some of the issues, and then open to the floor for questions and comments. So we're going to try to be a little less formal than is typical. To kick things off just a bit here, I'm just going to observe, looking around this room, that we have a mixture of people here, many with deep experience in South Asia, others with less. And Americans typically know very little about the Indian Ocean. And we tend to see global trends in terms of its effects only on North America, or at best on Europe and partners across the Pacific. So to start, Ranil, why should ignorant Americans like me and about 2% of the people in this room care about developments in the Indian Ocean?
Ken, we are in an axial age. And with apologies to Matthew Arnold, I would say we are wandering between two worlds, one dying and the other struggling to be born. Of course, this has happened before. In the 16th century, Columbus, Bartholomew Dias, and Magellan were responsible for global maritime navigation. And that opened the way for the global European powers to emerge. We had it again in the 19th century as a result of the American and the French Revolution. You found the political aspirations of the people and calling for their participation, ending up with what we call modern democracy today. There's the Industrial Revolution. Again, we found a drastic change from human energy to mechanical energy, and that laid the foundation for economic order, which is still what we know today. And again, we are in such an age. The globalized economy, the digital revolution, the climate change, and then Hariri, the jihadists, of whom we knew very little a decade or so ago. And this is a transition which is taking place throughout the world. But nowhere is this transition being felt more than in the Indian Ocean region. And that's why I thought of talking of it. I myself have been involved. I've watched the developments in the region for about 3 decades. I've been to China long before Deng Xiaoping took power, just after Mao Zedong died. Been to Lusaka when we were trying to get Zimbabwe independence. We've been to India long the time of Indira Gandhi and earlier. And the transition had taken, it's been much faster in China. But now you're seeing South Asia, Africa, countries in the region that want to catch up. And I thought of dealing with this, Ken, and the area that I want to highlight, it's such a wide topic, you can't cover everything. One is just tell you what the Indian Ocean is. Secondly, actually, to talk of South Asia, which should be naturally cohesive but is politically divided. Then the possibility for broader regional cooperation. And finally, what's the role of US, China, Japan, and the European powers in the Indian Ocean? Actually, by 2015, the Indian Ocean region will be the most populous in the world. India, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Iran, and Tanzania will have over 2.6 billion people. Then you have many other countries, five, Thailand, Myanmar, Iraq, Kenya, Mozambique, all will have over 50 million. Basically, these 11 countries will contain 1/3 of the 9.6 billion people who are going to live in the planet in 2050. The Indian Ocean itself has really been the east-west maritime highway. At the moment, 1/3 of the world trade goes through the Indian Ocean. It's far more, if you look at the world container traffic, 1/2. And 2/3 of all the oil products go through the Indian Ocean. And as the region develops, and as the Asian economies itself start growing, the volume is going to be much more. If you look at the ship design today, that takes into account the large quantities required by Asia. Economies of scale. So you're getting the large tankers, large container carriers, which are meant to go through Indian Ocean only. And as a result, there's a focus of the European powers, China, Japan, and others on the Indian Ocean. This is their main artery for trade. This is why I just like to quote from the Stimson Center report, Indian Ocean Rising, because Indian Ocean, the global intersection for geostrategic, economic, natural resource, and environmental issues where foreign powers and local actors' interests and objectives are inextricably intermixed. That's the best way to describe the region. Despite the fact that these global powers are there, the superpowers and others, the European powers, it doesn't mean that they have any say, full say over what happens in the Indian Ocean. The local actors, the regional actors are guided more by their own politics and the need for them to survive politically. So that's the Indian Ocean, which is going to be important in 2050.
So the importance of the Indian Ocean, I think, is clear. What are the problems that you see? What is the downside? What are the sources of instability? I'm a political scientist, so when I take off the engineering hat and put on the political science hat, I'm only allowed to think about bad things.
Okay.
So what are the sources of instability?
Politicians can only think of bad things. We can't think of good things. Actually, you take the National Intelligence Council Global Trends 2030. They've I think, got it spot on when they say Middle East and South Asia are the two regions most likely to trigger broader instability. And this is not only the state, there are non-state actors that are coming in, which is difficult, if not impossible, to control. And while we look at the political side, well, actually, there's another side, the economic side. Most countries in the region is going to have a youth bulge. That's why you're having this big population. Only very few countries, Sri Lanka, Singapore, very Malaysia, very few of us will not have a youth bulge. So how do you cater to the aspirations? Now, if you can't cater to the aspirations in these countries, you are going to have a large youth discontentment, which will just add, they support the extremists, maybe religious extremists, maybe ethnic extremists, but then you got a support base for violence. And that really is going to be the biggest threat, and that will have its own pressure on the political system. And you must remember that terrorism, violence, and corruption can weaken the total government structures in any of these countries. Having said that, it doesn't mean it's hopeless. I think the Indian Ocean region has yet to realize its full economic potential, and that's what I'm talking about. Why don't we tap onto that? But to do so, there are key geopolitical rivalries which can threaten the peace and stability of the region. I mean, we've got to resolve those issues. Then you will have an atmosphere which will enable broader regional cooperation to take place. So when I'm talking of this, it will be South Asian centric, but it just reflects the power structure of South Asia. Secondly, if you are looking at growth in the Indian Ocean region, India must have double-digit growth for at least 2 decades, similar to the growth that China enjoyed in the comparable region. It's only then that India can really punch above its weight and also be an engine for the growth in the Indian Ocean region.
So relations between India and Pakistan are often problematic. These are obviously the two large powers in the area. But these two nuclear armed powers have modest domestic internal issues. I understand there may be an election coming in one. And you've had vast experience as Prime Minister dealing with the leaders of these countries and observing internal relations. Could you give us a sense of your observations on relations between these powers and on internal threats within each?
Actually, Ken, because South Asia dominates the Indian Ocean region, then the relationship between these two powers, the only countries which possess nuclear arms in the region, have a bearing on the whole region. It overshadows everything else. Well, if you want my experience, I was Prime Minister in 2002 when they nearly went to war. India mobilized about 500,000 troops, and the Pakistan had 300,000. They had the nuclear weapons. I mean, it was an awful moment. I don't think anyone would like to go through it. And I knew both of them personally. Mr. Vajpayee, I had known him for over 25 years, from the time I started politics. Fortunately, I mean, India decided on some of the steps to be taken, and that sort of cooled down the situation. But then you had another flashpoint, the attack on Mumbai. And there I think the Indian government has to be commended for the restraint it showed. But having said that, I don't know, Pakistan seems to be in a situation where they can't control what's happening internally. That's what it has led to. The actual nuclear weapons stockpile in India and Pakistan, a lot of people say, are not high compared to Russia and the USA. But both sides have developed short and medium range missiles, and India has gone in for long range missiles. The whole Agni family of missiles are actually long range. It goes for thousands and thousands of kilometers, and India says that's a part of their aspiration to be a global power. It has nothing to do with the conflict with Pakistan, but it means all of them, and then they are developing nuclear submarines. So there's the platforms are increasing from which the nuclear weapons can be fired. In Pakistan is talking of developing a missile that can be fired, nuclear missile that can be fired from a submarine. But what does it mean? In the sum total, they have sufficient nuclear weapons to blow up that part of the subcontinent, and there will be nothing left. So what we find here then is both the proliferation of nuclear weapons together with terrorism, which makes it the most volatile region in the world. But on the other hand, having been there, having known, meeting people, what I'd like to tell you is that the people of both of India and Pakistan have no appetite for war. Any war will destroy Gujarat and Punjab completely. That's the first thing that we have to realize. And both sides accept the reality that Kashmir is divided. There's a line of control. Whether we like it or not, that's going to be there for a long time. The middle class, the growing middle class in India and Pakistan, they don't want war. The business community are not invested in India and in Pakistan to have missiles raining on them. Neither do the ordinary people want. There are people who think that Pakistan will disappear if India puts pressure on it. It doesn't happen. There are extremists in Pakistan who think Muslims in India will lead a jihad. No. In fact, some of the best generals who are leading the Indian army are Muslims. But I think the bulk of them are satisfied playing out their interstate rivalry at cricket. I mean, they win cricket, and if they lose or when they are dissatisfied, they go and sort of go and demolish the house of the captain on the other side. So that's what we have come to, but that's not sufficient.
Now, cricket is a very, very good way to handle interstate rivalry, I think. Although sometimes I think it actually exacerbates it. But it's obviously not quite enough. Now, there are talks that go on, sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully. They're complicated. Could you give us a sense of your views on interstate discussions, both formal and informal, and their potential for improving the status of relations within the region?
They've been having interstate discussions for long. Let's start from the similar talks which Bhutto and Indira Gandhi, but they can't clinch it. At the end of the day, there are talks, and they started what we thought were the composite dialogue, the back channel negotiations, all this, but they all came to a stop. Fine, one because the Musharraf Chief Justice clash in Pakistan, the other after the Mumbai attack. When the two prime ministers met last year at the General Assembly in New York, there were talk of resuming they said the talks will be resumed, but nothing has happened. Now, I think if you look at these type of talks where you try to, your main focus is on how to structure the talks, battle for talks. Now, these are conventional approach. Now, how can a conventional approach apply in an unconventional situation? It's not only two state actors, there are other non-state players who are coming into it. And my impression on the talks on both sides is that those who are engaged in the talks seem to be engaged in a war of attrition without a final objective. It just keeps going on and on. So you just can't do then. Then the experts talk of how can we participate, conceding as little as possible. And then some non-state actor like LET or the Pakistan Taliban comes and the whole thing is blown off. So at the end of it, all you have had is increasing defense expenditure, which the countries can ill afford. And there's complete lack of trust on both sides. The other day there was a talk of India being given non-discriminatory market access to Pakistan. Now, what is that? That is what we call most favored nation status. Now, they can't use the word MFN. They say they can't give most favored nation status. So this is how the talks go on. Then the Indians say, no, you must first open up, you must decide on the number of items. So the whole thing got out of control. I basically feel that you have to take out of the box approach. There's no other way. You are talking of confidence building. I mean, what's the confidence building? These are the same people, Indians and Pakistanis. Manmohan Singh was born in Punjab. Musharraf was born in Delhi. And they all have relations elsewhere. They know each other. They made their judgments and finish. People want to live in peace, whatever the suspicion they have the others, of the other country. But But it's a question of how the two governments with their interests can cut a deal. And how do you get to that? And then to cut that deal, you must have the space. And I would say both these have to go concurrently. There's no other way. So the traditional experts' approach has to be tempered both with the flexibility of the politicians and the unpredictability of the non-state actors. Both come into it. You can imagine how difficult it is. But I can't see if there being any other option. If you look at it today, while the Indian elections are on, the Pakistan has already set the agenda. When the issues came in India, can Modi talk to Pakistan, which was the internal issue for India? Pakistan said, no, we are prepared to meet with any person who's elected. We are prepared to meet with Mr. Modi, and we want to have a composite dialogue. Now they said the option. Can the new Indian government, with this BJP or non-BJP or anything, say we don't want to talk? And then can they get out of the composite dialogue? So what do you do? I mean, in a way, it's a problem. I feel personally, having known Nawaz Sharif, he wants to go ahead. But there are factors. Then how do the Indians may not like this format? But nevertheless, after the elections are over, the Pakistanis are going to mention, let's start the talks. So how do you approach it? Now, let's start from there. Do you like it or not? There has to be talks now. One who chickens out, then we'll be in trouble.
So if you look to the motives of India and Pakistan, the interest in pushing forward with talks, and it always comes down to mutual interest. And that mutual interest in matters of security tends to be driven by military balance and by internal forces and pressures and instability. Could you give us a sense of how you see both military balances shifting and internal forces changing in these two countries?
Well, the problem of Pakistan after the Bangladesh was declared is they haven't got the strategic depth to face any conventional attack by the Indian armed forces. It's from there. First, you had these alliances, Pakistan, China, USA. On the other hand, you had Soviet Union, India. Then you had the proxy wars. You had Soviet Union came to Afghanistan. Pakistan thought they are losing out on strategic depth. So you found Taliban. Then Mr. Gandhi thought that we were getting friendly with America. So we had the war there. Finally, the Soviets pulled out. Rajiv Gandhi and Sri Lanka, we made peace with each other. Then came the next round where Pakistan decided to look at, to explore a nuclear device, followed by India, and the Soviet Union collapsed. So it basically goes around two issues. I think the lack of strategic depth in Pakistan, and they fear Indian attack. What are we going to do? So they look at nuclear weapons, and they have not ruled out the first strike option. When you're looking in such a situation, maybe they say we are not ruling out the first strike option. So what are the Indians doing? Now Indians have built up their own nuclear arsenal to deter Pakistan from making a attack. But India is also developing its capacity to fight on two fronts, its army and its air force both. If you go across the Himalaya to Ladakh to Sikkim, you find the new roads are being built. Other side, the same thing is happening in Tibet with the Chinese. So you find that Russia, the Indians are getting ready for two-front war to be a global power, and the Pakistanis are looking at the conventional that how are they going to protect themselves from any conventional war. Now this is the for me this is the core issue. This is what finally the security, and there's enough distrust between the two. But nevertheless, you have to start the talks, whether you like it or not. My view is have three tracks. Have the composite dialogue, have the back channel negotiation, but start a new one. Start a public debate. What are we going to do? I think India can start it very easily. Public debate. Because my view is everyone has now become a stakeholder in the Indo-Pakistan situation except the people on both sides. So give them a stake. Let there be a big debate. I have sufficient confidence that neither side, people on either side just don't want to blow it up. So they go through this debate, very interesting, 2 years, 3 years, but it means the others have to play by the debate. There will be attempts to sabotage it. Then a big debate will take place. Who tried to sabotage it? Actually, I found in India that in Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif's brother had made a statement that the army was against it. Then I found in India again a statement that the Minister of Defense, Mr. Anthony, was not in favor of some of the things that the Prime Minister had done. Whether it's correct or no is a different matter. But the fact is, for the first time, people are speaking out and saying that there are people who try to stop that. Then, of course, the whole question of Pakistan, Taliban, LET. So let it all that surface. Now, what happens in a discussion is that says the parameter as to where the deal can be. And I think it's going to be sufficient. It will be sufficient for the discussions. And then along that, the other negotiations can take place. So but it also means there has to be a change which the Indians have to accept. There has to be more people-to-people contact between the two countries. The whole idea of holding back people-to-people contact or trade for the relationship to normalize, no, that I don't think is not my view. Mine is go ahead. One of the best things would be for the Indian government to allow the Pakistan players for the IPL. They were stopped after the Mumbai blast, but I think that will be the most popular one in the whole subcontinent. And this whole debate won't be confined to India, Pakistan.
But who would win?
I don't know. The losing side captain, no, there are different teams. So it's a question of who bids for whom. It will be very interesting to see how much are they willing to bid for single play. But you have another question. Can you change? If you look at the match, whenever Sri Lanka plays India, Pakistan and Bangladesh support us. And when Sri Lanka plays Pakistan, India and Bangladesh support us.
So this is all a plan to get support for Sri Lanka.
Yeah, you'll see how this. But it will be one good. It will be like the ping pong diplomacy. Go ahead. And I know from my experience, the people will go for a practical solution. They won't go for these hair splitting exercises that the policy establishment on both sides. But while that goes on, what is important is the back channel negotiations. And that is where I think that it should be restricted just to the main issues. How do we ensure that India is secure, Pakistan is secure? What is expected of us? What are the effective ways, the guarantees that Pakistan expects, that there won't be a conventional attack? What are the guarantees that India expects? There won't be a nuclear attack. So those are the issues. Actually going on this one I've been reading, one of the guarantees for Pakistan is that India takes so long to mobilize. It took 1 month to mobilize after the parliament attack, and the last occasion it took something like 3 weeks. So, but nevertheless, and it also brings into the issue of, it picks up the issue of who controls the terrorists operating in Pakistan in the area. So these negotiations, for me, are the most important. It must go on. It must not stop. Take it for 2 years, 3 years while the debate is on. See where you go. And I think a lot of issues can be discussed. I just made a list of them. Some of them I thought might come up. The first strike option. Why should Pakistan and India both say that neither will go in for the first strike option? Then what's called the cold start doctrine. Indians say it's not there, but I think there's a contingency plan of going, if the terrorist attack, going into certain areas of Pakistan, holding it, preventing a nuclear attack by Pakistan. Then what concerns India and many others is Pakistan's asymmetrical escalation. But it's not, this can trigger off a war. Someone in one region, some commander can trigger off a war. And this brings into the whole central command authorization in Pakistan, which I think is an issue not only for India, but for USA and many others. Pakistan will want to take the Indian, the MIRV. Obviously, you can't prevent them from the status of Pakistan, Taliban, and the LET will be very, very important in the talks. I think might as well go through all this. Then Kashmir, but I know from what I understand, a lot of the issues on Kashmir have been discussed. Kashmir is no longer the major issue. It's other ones. So Afghanistan will be more important for Pakistan to have settlement which they can accept. But remember, Pakistan, Afghan settlement, not Indian Pakistan. They have to get involved. All the Afghan actors have to be there. USA has to be there. China has to be there. Russia has to be there. So how you work this out is going to be interesting. But I think you will, if once you take these issues up, many of them will get resolved. So act on the ones that are resolved.
So you've articulated areas or identified areas of potential mutual interest where India and Pakistan should be able to talk and to improve relations by addressing points of tension and concern. And this is all rational. Okay? And one can say that acting on mutual interest in this setting, or even looking back to your time as Prime Minister, oftentimes rational pursuit of self-interest through negotiation is disrupted by other parties that come in and destroy talks, oppose talks. So the question here is that who in the region, in these countries, might destroy the prospects for realization of mutual interest by opposing the talks or disrupting them? Again, it's not the nice question, but it's the hard question.
No, that's interesting because certain the extremists, and if you're starting the negotiations, you must have the black channel. You must first discuss of how you will, what's the hotline that will function. Because there's going to be a major, there'll be at least one, if not two major attacks inside India to disrupt it.
Yeah.
So extremists are one. Other establishment, that is sections of the establishment on both sides. The very important issue at the beginning are the internal dynamics. Take Pakistan. What is the relationship that the Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, who was ousted, has with the army? And then the talks with the Pakistan Taliban. Any new government in India, is the internal dynamics are going to matter. But of all this, I think they have to look at another attack or two in India, and maybe big ones, by some of the terrorist groups, and how they cope with that. Should be the first issue in me. As far as I'm concerned, they should talk at the back channel negotiations. Then you will ask, what is in this for India? It's very interesting. But if you're in Indian position, what can you do? You can't stay without going for talks. You have to go for talks. Then if you go for talks and there is attack, you can't unleash nuclear missiles. So it looks as if it's a sort of a no-win situation, and it's not the case. India should look at, I think, the long term. If that development, if you can reduce your tension to start to start double-digit development in India, to have a better regional mechanism, in the long term, India becomes more powerful. Your per capita GDP goes up. Otherwise, by 2050, you'll be the third largest economy GDP-wise. But your per capita income still may be a low middle income economy. Now, if you get out of that, and you can, your per capita income increases, that's where the clout is. And then you can have money for what you call guns and butter both if you want it, or put it other way, in geese and guns both. But India has the economic clout. Otherwise, India may not have that economic clout. So in the long term, if you have the economic clout and you have a better relations with Pakistan, and your ambition of being a global power gets fulfilled, okay, I think you have to look at long term and take the shots in the short and the medium term. For Pakistan, I think the defense expenditure is unsustainable. If you look at the social issues of Pakistan, look at education, health, how backward it is. Even Bangladesh is getting ahead. And all that, it is making into a pressure cooker. The Pakistan will become a pressure cooker. It can explode. And otherwise, there will be a weakening of the government. So it's in Pakistan's interest to stabilize, to have more money for social expenditure, and to become a regional player in the West Asia, in Central Asia, in South Asia. And more than anything else, rapid growth means rapid development of the middle class on both sides. And those are the people who have a vested interest in ensuring that there is stability on the subcontinent. So those are the players and the interests that each of them represent.
So we've been focusing primarily on India and Pakistan, and they clearly are the most significant actors in the region. But there are plenty of other countries with different interests. Is a broader regional approach, moving away from simply Indian-Pakistani relations, is a broader regional approach that engages a much wider range of actors needed.
No, we have to do it. But there's another geopolitical issue that I'd like to refer to. That is Iran. The moderates in Iran have to be strengthened. I don't think there are any out there. Look at the power structure of Iran. Because what is really worrying is the Shia-Sunni clash. And that stretches from Afghanistan into Iraq, into Syria. Now, if this is containable, the other issues in the West Asia will not, certainly will not go outside their national borders. So it is essential that the moderates in Iran be strengthened and the Sunni Shia issue goes out. Then I think these are the two major issues. Once you do that, you've got the political atmosphere is ready. And how do you bring about broader cooperation? Because we have what we have for the Indian Ocean is what's called the Indian Ocean, originally it was called the Indian Ocean Regional Association for Cooperation, IORAC. Now they function for some time and their main achievement has been to change their name into Indian Ocean Rim Association.
It is not the catchiest word. Right?
Yeah, it's not. Okay. But the problem there is I think some of the countries are not even involved in it. They look at regional cooperation. Now, intra-regional trade is not the issue. From bulk of the countries, our markets are out in the West. It's either USA and Europe. That's been the traditional markets, Europe. In addition to this, there is China now coming as a big investor, aid donor, and Japan. What we need really is more investments, more trade. So what you read is not so much development or intra-regional trade, it must be first integration with the global economy. If you integrate with the global economy, the regional trade anyway will start increasing. That is necessary. Now, how do you do it? You cannot replace IORA. IORA, the key players are India, South Africa, Australia, but the others don't have a stake in it. But I would say let IORA be there because you can't integrate the whole of the Indian Ocean region at once. That is impossible. There are different levels of development. I would advocate there two sub-regional initiatives. The Bay of Bengal initiative, which is to promote open regionalism, and through open regionalism, economic development. There will be 10 countries there: Maldives, Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Australia. But you need others. You have to bring Japan in, China in, USA in, and EU. And then work it out. I mean, our economies are complementary. And many of them anyway belong to the Asia Pacific Economic Community, which is committed to open trade and investment by 2020. So who are the peers outside that? EU, which anyway doesn't get into it. Then India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Maldives, and Myanmar. Myanmar is a special case. India anyway is looking at trying to join the APEC. So it's a political decision to take on each of the countries for market integration and non-discriminatory approach. Whether we like it or not, we will all get into it. So you might as well start that. Now, if you do that, you find a big market around the Indian Ocean, which has traditionally been Bay of Bengal, was I think for thousands of years a big trading region. And just what you are doing is the APEC open trading, you are pushing to include India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. So you brought it up to that level. Second is the West and Central Asian Initiative, which actually Pakistan has been promoting it a lot. And I think India and Pakistan should jointly take the West and the Central Asian Initiative or see how they can integrate. So that gives Pakistan a role. Once you have those, then you are left with Africa. Actually, the African Economic Community and its 3 sub-regional organizations which deal with these states on the Indian Ocean border in the Indian Ocean are already going through different phases of integration. Actually, they start from a much lower base, but that's the third. So what do you do after that? Once you do that, at that stage you can think of total integration and how do you restructure the Indian Ocean Rim Association, because the opportunities are immense. If you are going to have such a large increase in population, one, their income level will go up. Their demand for basic foodstuffs. Then there will be those who will go up in the food supply chain. So where are you going to supply the food? The land is there in Africa. So that's one that creates employment. Then value addition of all the food. Just feeding all the people. The logistics, movements. So that's one big opportunity. Healthcare for all of them. Education for them. Connectivity for all that. I mean, banking facilities. If you look at manufacturing goods, the weakest of the states will have a per capita GDP of about $800. And I think India, Pakistan have manufacturers who have been catering for that before they went up before the per capita GDP increased. So there are immense opportunities. If you start with integration, it will bring investments, and the integration should be phased in. I think you should give 10 years for the Bay of Bengal initiative. So it starts 2015 at the point, 225. 230 for the West and Central Asia. It may be 235, a bit more to bring Africa in. But what are you doing? What we are doing actually is ensuring there's a momentum in the global economy. After the APEC open trading phase is over and China's economy has been converted into domestic consumption. Where do you go from there? So it's a plan that takes you up into about 2040. Now this is what we are thinking of, but Ken, I must tell you, you have been in, social sciences, political sciences, and forecasting is a hazardous enterprise. History is being reshaped by events which none of us have thought of. Basically, if you look at why are we all here, because one Serbian nationalist student on 28th of June 1914 decided to go out and assassinate an archduke whose car took a wrong turn. So this is something that we haven't. So we have to look at what are the downsides. What will happen if these things don't take place? And I made another list of it. That's why I thought I should look into it. Okay, if the geopolitical rivalry is not contained, then the prediction in the NIC report, Global Trends 2030, will come true. And you will find there will be much broader instability in the region. You find religious movement extremism and ethnic extremism, and you have to look at the crescent which goes from Afghanistan to Syria. I mean, those are really going to be the trouble spots, and some of the governing institutions in some of the countries, Afghanistan, even Pakistan, can collapse. You find the non-state actors, not only terrorists. You find multilateral organizations, human rights, environmentalists, all will be playing a bigger role. And as this happens, if you haven't got sufficient growth in India, you will find what we call the fragmentation of government. The powers will go more and more to the states, and you will find that the center is becoming weaker in India. So that's the scenario. And as tension grows between India and Pakistan, then the US and China will have to intervene. They may have to work together. And you find them playing a bigger role. And maybe Indo-Pakistan issues may no longer be bilateral. It is not in India, Pakistan, or anyone's interest, Iran's interest, to have this scenario. So that's why it's my belief that you can push this forward and make some headway in the region.
So the terrible things that you were raising from your list were based on the assumption that geopolitical rivalry within the region was not contained, that economic progress would not take place, that growth would not happen. And if within the region these problems materialize, the bad things that you were discussing had very serious implications for countries outside the region, for the United States, for Japan, for China, for the rest of the world. how do you see the role of these outside actors? To put this delicately, the effect of external meddling within the Indian Ocean in the past has not always been good. So how do you see the role of external actors looking in to these very difficult problems, because they will be involved, and will it be constructive or destructive?
Well, external actors have been there for a long time.
Oh, yes.
And the regional countries have all survived by playing one against the other until the British took over the whole lot.
The British.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
But now the United States is the key player. And we are different from Atlantic and the Pacific. That the key players are not from the region. US has been there. It came in World War II. It's been an aid donor. It's been an investor. It's been a market. And it has a long with a number of countries. It has defense assistance packs. And that's going to continue. I don't think anyone is looking at US pulling out of the region. US has to be there. But then what is the relationship that they are going to have in the region? I feel that US has a big role to play in market integration. Forget about security, I mean. Whether they want to confine security to the nations of the region or not, wouldn't matter, because all the key players anyway have defense agreements with the USA. But if you look at USA, the policy seems to be that you must control the 8 key choke points in the Indian Ocean. If you lose control of those choke points, then you lose control of the maritime trade in the Indian Ocean. These are the key shipping lanes. And the sustaining US global leadership priorities of the 21st century, that report talks of it, and talks of a US Navy, a 300 ship Navy with about 11 Gerald Ford aircraft carriers and about 90 surface combatant ships. Now, that more is a question for the Congress as to what the budget is going to allow. You have a Navy that big and you think aircraft carriers have to play a role. Yes, you will have it, but if you have to cut it back, then what happens? Then you have to have alliances, strong alliances with Australia, India. China is not trying to dominate the Indian Ocean militarily. It can't. And even in Asia, whatever said and done, the dominant power is US. The other big navies are Japan and India. Then there's Korea and Australia.
Now, Japan just has a coast guard, not a navy.
I know that.
Yeah.
That's yes. They call their destroyers frigates. They call their cruisers destroyers, and they call their aircraft carriers helicopter carriers. But anyway, nonetheless, Japan has the most modern navy in Asia. India has had the experience. Australia has had the same experience. So it is difficult for China to have a blue water navy that can reach out into the Indian Ocean or take them all on. My own assessment, most of feel that they are building the surface combatants, especially to safeguard their shipping that comes into the region. But they are going as soft diplomacy, and they have become the biggest aid donors to the region, and maybe the biggest source of corruption also in the region.
Yeah.
So it has pluses and minuses. They're building a lot of harbors. They built one in Sri Lanka. But what is most important are the 2 harbors that they have found. One they have built in Pakistan, which gives access to Xinjiang. So that gives them access. India gets access, China gets access to the Indian Ocean. And so it's the same status as Nepal or Bhutan, which are now joined BIMSTEC. The other is the idea of having a port in Myanmar. That has been on the hold for some time, but I think it will take place. Of course, the idea originally came not from the Chinese, but it is the Burma Road that US developed in World War II. Most probably General Stilwell's the one who cut the road. So these are the 2 key players, and they are going to be in the Indian Ocean. Next is the European Union, especially Britain and France are big players there. They still keep their navies which operate with the US Navy. Japan has a big say. Actually, the Maritime Defense Force has now come up to the Persian Gulf. They took part with the US Navy in the Iraq War, and they were helping out in the Gulf War. So that's the role of these other players, these other actors who are not from the region. Then India itself India's freedom of the sea, India's maritime, military maritime document talks of having 3 aircraft carriers, and that's what they are building on. They're building on their new frigates. Actually, India has 4 aircraft carriers because Andaman Island looks after the whole of the Bay of Bengal. So you get one which looks after the western coast, one which can go to the south of Indian Ocean, and one which has to be in repair, which is not surprising because they buy Russian aircraft carriers. But then what's the role of the Indian Navy? It wants to be a global power. And to that comes the other interesting issue. What is the US-India relations going to be after the elections? There are 3 scenarios. One is Congress with the help of the third front. Congress can't form a government by itself. Other is what they say, the Congress says more likely third front with the help of Congress. Now the third front contains the left parties, the communist parties, which were against the civil nuclear deal and which has certain policy issues of how you cooperate with India. The other government is Modi-led BJP government, and the relations are very, very strained. So I think for US, you've got to start sorting out the India-US relationship after the elections, and that's going to be not going to be easy, but nevertheless it has to be done. So that's the final scenario that I can see for the region.
So we'll turn to questions in a moment, and we have microphones, and the AV guys have asked us to make sure that we use the microphones. But, I mean, what are your concluding thoughts? And then we can turn to the crowd.
Well, what I have given is what I think is a long-term vision for the region and maybe the only way out. Many of us may not be alive by the time if it takes in, but that's the only.
There are many young people here, so.
Yes, they have the opportunities. Yeah, and the need to develop political and strategic arrangements which will enhance the greater potential of the Indian Ocean. This is the only way that 2 or 3 billion people in the Indian Ocean will be able to live a better life, free of their generation and insecurities. And we are to liberate these people from the torments of history. This should be the collective goal of the regional leaders. Unfortunately, it's not realized so far, but we work at it, it can be done. And certainly, the US will have a major role in this.
Very good. So we have a microphone on this side and a microphone on that side. We can do the Oprah Winfrey, work the audience with the microphone and bring it to you, or we can actually ask you to come to the microphones. But if you have questions or comments, and what I'll do is I'll take it over to you, okay?
Thank you very much. I had a question. Could you elaborate a little bit on the views of China and the U.S. within the region? I was actually in Sri Lanka a year ago, and it was interesting because all the infrastructure projects seem to be being run by the Chinese. And I know that, because of U.S. and European sort of objections to some of the political regimes in the area, there's been less development and aid. So I'm curious, across the Indian Ocean, how are the two sort of perceived, and what do you think the U.S. can do to change, now that we're pivoting to Asia, so to speak, to change to be more influential in the region beyond just military? Thank you.
I'm actually not sure that we're really pivoting to Asia, but that's a topic for another discussion. Ranil.
No, firstly, what the Chinese are doing is they're providing long-term loans, not at very concessional rate of 0.5% or 1%, but can go up to 6 or 7% for infrastructure projects. Now, some of the countries do require infrastructure projects, but for many of us, we need market access. The market access can only be given by US and Europe. Our markets are there. Funnily enough, we don't sell, take Sri Lanka. A very little that we do with Japan, exposed to Japan, China, or India. Then we'll need investments. For investments, it's Europe, America, and Japan. Japan can make the investment. So that's what matters if we are to really be lifted out. Chinese are given aid, we have built some roads. Africans have built roads, we built harbors, but they haven't the machinery to assess whether the projects are viable. And that's what happened in Sri Lanka. But now the projects, the Chinese aid has raised another problem within China. The corruption crackdown by the president has first started on the infrastructure projects in China, and now they find that it's happening with the aid project, which is true. The rip-off is high. There are much as in aid project, 50% is rip-off. The Chinese companies are just getting countries to sign this. We have found differentials in road building projects, the prices in Sri Lanka and in Kenya. So it looks as if Chinese, the anti-corruption drive is going to come into all the projects, not only in the Indian Ocean region, but maybe in South America. There'll be less money available in the short term. And anyway, there seems to be a different approach being taken as the Chinese economy is being restructured for domestic, to increase domestic consumption. So actually, in my view, there isn't a clash. If what you require is investments, and that investments can only come from Europe, US and Japan and South Korea. China can't give that investment. If the Chinese invest in our countries, they'll be creating a rival for China at the workshop of the world. Then the question of market access, that gets tied down to the whole WTO, which is not taking place. This is why I am talking of a Indian Ocean region. I think the broader regional arrangements will be required. You can't, all of us can't come and dump in the American market and the European market, but as you start improving, and as there's the intra-regional trade grows, the economies will grow. So that's.
Thank you very, very much for your presentation. I have a question. What is your opinion about the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership? And what do you think about that? And what is the significance of leaving China outside of the TPP?
I think any arrangement in the Pacific has to include China. You can't leave China out. China is a key player. It's been the largest economy in the world. You have to bring China in to any arrangement. It's better to have them inside the tent than have them outside.
Just one little note. The TPP, or Trans-Pacific Partnership, is actually in some difficulty now. Without fast-track authority, whatever is negotiated will not necessarily survive Congress. And so there's a lot of attention being paid to the negotiation, but it's not very clear at all whether this, and I agree with Ranil that a negotiation without China does leave out a significant actor, but whether it will amount to as much as is expected is not clear at all right now. Are there other questions? Yes.
You know, all the talk in the region is about India, Pakistan, and China, really, as far as the major powers are concerned. And I know that India's building a navy of considerable scope that is sometimes viewed as a future gendarme of the region. I'm curious about your perspective on Indonesia as a rising power in the region, because look at that map, and it just is so striking. Indonesia with 400 million people, somewhat dynamic economy. I'm not sure of the statistics, but certainly one that could rival India to some extent, or at least be a major player. And I wonder if it will be a rival economically and militarily in the region, and how that works in relationship to relations with China and Japan and India. I see you're also right in the middle between them.
The Indonesia will most probably have the fifth largest economy by GDP terms. So you have India with the third largest economy and Indonesia the fifth. This is one of the reasons that I've been proposing the Bay of Bengal initiative. You get number 3 and number 5 into it. There's a lot of potential in Indonesia. And Indonesia certainly will be a player. The Indonesian, traditionally, even in history, Indonesia has been a player, and the Bay of Bengal trade has always shifted between the Indian side and those on what we call the Malay side, that's Malay Peninsula, and Indonesia. At the moment, the Indonesians are talking about keeping a balance in the region between the USA and China. But finally, the Indonesian Navy is there, but the more modern Navy at the moment is with Singapore, I would say. But in Indonesia, certainly, because as Malacca Straits get filled, some of them will have to use the Sea of Banda Sea and others for ships to go, and there will be I think the key to this is how Australia and Indonesia are going to coordinate with each other on that stretch.
If you look to, just to follow up on John's question, if you look internally at Indonesia, it has a past where not all of the governments have been uncorrupt. And in fact, there are times when they've set not quite the world standard, but a regional standard for kleptocracy, with a political economy that wasn't developing as well, in part because of that dysfunction. How do you see the current Indonesia and the prospects for, let's call it better economic management, as a factor that is as significant as strategic position?
No, Indonesia will be a key player, and it will have clout, in my view. But you need better economic management to get to the next level of technology. At the moment, they're looking on natural resources. That's not enough. That's really going to be the key to Indonesia, in my view, in the next decade. How do you go to the next level of economic development? Now, there's another player which we don't realize, that is Singapore, which by 2050 may have the highest per capita GDP in the world at 100,000 US. It's building up a navy which no one realizes. It's very significant. Its air force is good. And Indonesia, and we feel it will be the financial center for South Asia and Southeast Asia. The other is that the Singaporeans are looking at the southern India for investments. They feel they're getting crowded out of China. And if you find Singaporean money going in there just as much as you find in Indonesia, you find Singapore being a key player, financially, economically, and Indonesia. I feel that in the long term, India and Indonesia will come to some arrangement.
Good. We have a question here.
What do you think the prospects are for the India-China relationship, especially after India's election?
It's difficult to say because it depends who comes in. Now, let's take the Modi factor. Mr. Modi has been to China 3 times, while the Americans are denying him the visa. He's very friendly with the Japanese. He's very friendly with the South Koreans. In the short term, I don't know, one way is to look at whether he comes to an understanding with China, because anyway, India and China won't go to war on the Himalayas. They are concerned, China is concerned about Tibet. The possibility may be the BJP wants India recognized as the regional power. And what do they get in return with the Indians also being in Vietnam and South China Sea, they're claiming. So it may, and they have one common interest, which is stability in Pakistan, which concerns both of them. So in out-of-the-box scenario, even this can't be ruled out. It's commonality of interest, nothing else. It may be a short term, but it will give him the breather he wants to get the economy moving in India.
Good evening. Do you think the role that the domestic media has played in, especially in Pakistan and India, has been helpful in building the relationships between two countries? And how do you see the role evolving as over time?
Actually, you find in both countries, sometimes the media takes what we call the patriotic line. But remember, you can basically, what's the difference between Hindi and Urdu? And English, so you get onto NDTV, Pakistan, and on the web you can read all this, you read the Dawn, you read the Times of India, Hindu, so it's accessible to all these people. And I think the media will have a very important role when the public debate takes place, both in India and Pakistan. You see, actually Indian TV now gets comments from Pakistanis, Pakistan TV gets comments from Indian. I am all for increasing that people-to-people contact between the two countries. At the end of it, it won't harm the relationship between two countries. There will be people who press extremist views. But you have to realize there's Hindi and Urdu are the same, and there's something else outside cricket I forgot to mention, what's called Bollywood. That's also, in a way, the people-to-people contacts are working much faster than what the two governments are doing on the continent.
Other questions? Yes. I'll try to get this back to you. And if you could also move that way.
Mr. Wickramsinghe, first of all, let me let you know that as a Colombo West voter, how proud I am to hear you give us such a cogent analysis on macro issues. My question is actually micro. We talked about cricket, and recently Sri Lanka cricket had an issue of this big three, and of that India was to get the lion's share, and Sri Lanka and Pakistan initially protested. And then had to go along with the cricket establishment. So my question to you is that when you are talking about these macro alignments, which is actually beneficial for all of us, how do you deal with the micro issues of nationalism and segments of that, where people would, especially in a country like Sri Lanka, would say we are being absorbed by India? How do you deal with that?
No, there'll always be nationalist sentiments and extreme sentiments. Sri Lanka, despite all its problems, has survived. And it's very difficult to keep it down. Maybe keep it down for some time you can. But I can't see that really. I don't agree on that, what they talk of it. To begin with, India burnt its hand in 1987, and they're unlikely to come in. They are looking at their role as a regional power. Now, we all accept the fact that India is a regional power. The fact is, only issue is that we don't want it to be the hegemon. It should be able to merge all the multiple interests of all our countries. India does that. Then it should be, we could live along with it. But Indian economy has to grow. And it's the people-to-people contact that's going to matter most. Within India, I know, some of the people from South India find it they are more at home in Colombo than in Delhi. Similarly, we find that we are more at home in Tamil Nadu or in Kerala than we are in Delhi. So it's actually, you might find that there might be unofficial regional arrangements of Sri Lanka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Bangalore, all of them getting together and working out their own arrangements. Because again, you take India, it's very much, you get West Bengal must link up with it's like USA. You have the southern states which border Mexico, and the northern and the boundary one which goes with Canada. So I can't say that it will be played, but actually at the end of the day, I found some of those who shout most are the ones who have been going most to Delhi.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. Then what remains is to thank our speaker, Ranil, for an extremely cogent analysis and good responses to the questions, and also for, again, coming to MIT for this visit. Thank you again.
Again, I must thank everyone here for coming and listening, and maybe some of them can take these ideas forward.
Okay. So
because
the challenge...
we didn't tell what exactly Colombo West is, that's a different story.
The challenge is to you. Thank you again.